sort of star-filled
Right now, you are in the path of an epidemic. An epidemic with one new case every 16 seconds. An epidemic of diseases that can be cured, but too often aren't. The reason? Ignorance.
So I'm running a cartoon.
Venereal disease. What is it?
How do you get it? How do you know if you have VD?
What happens if you don't get VD cured?
Can you tell by looking if someone has VD?
Thousands of years ago, when they built the Great Pyramids of Egypt,
So I always run a film.
many of the workers probably had gonorrhea.
As a kind of to do a tech check.
Oh, sure.
Some of the pharaohs who paid the bills
Weirdly, there's a VD connection.
probably had it too. Gonorrhea is perhaps as old as man himself,
So how do you want to
but only recently did we finally learn how to cure it.
the films? How to pack a suitcase first and then just kind of launch into...
When Christopher Columbus, certain the world was round, sailed west to find India,
What do you want to watch next? After that?
he discovered at least two things he never expected. America and syphilis. The latter broke out among his crew on the return voyage.
And Destination Earth.
The disease may have been there before, but there was no natural immunity to syphilis in Europe. From the waterfront, it spread like wildfire. In the first 10 years, early syphilis killed 12 million Europeans. Then natural resistance developed and syphilis no longer killed instantly. But it continued to spread until it covered the entire world. Syphilis and gonorrhea are just two of a long list of communicable diseases. Some communicable diseases are spread through the air. Some are carried by insects, and some are transmitted by food. Syphilis and gonorrhea are spread by sexual contact. They're called venereal diseases, or VD for short. What kind of people get VD? Every kind. From every walk of life. They might not be one bit different from you and me. First, let's get rid of a lot of misinformation. You do not, I repeat, you do not get VD from doorknobs, toilet seats, eating utensils. You don't get VD from cups and glasses. Drinking fountains, heavy lifting or straining, uncleanliness, insects. You don't get VD from animals. Nor any of the following. There is only one way to get a venereal disease: sexual contact. You can't tell by appearance if someone has VD. Infected people look just like anyone else. Birth control pills do not protect you against VD. Gonorrhea has many nicknames. Flap, a dose, strain, gleat, the whites, morning drop. But a rose by any other name is still gonorrhea, and here's the organism responsible. It's called a gonococcus. It thrives in the moist tissue of human sex organs, but it can't live outside the body. Changes in temperature, dryness will kill it. Gonorrhea is transmitted by sexual intercourse or some other sexual contact with someone who has it. Men can tell when they get gonorrhea. 2 to 6 days after infection, there's a painful inflammation of the urethral canal. There's a thick discharge of pus and an unbearable pain when you urinate. Don't wait. See a doctor. Most gonorrhea can be cured painlessly in just a few days. But the clock is ticking, and each day you go without treatment, the effects get worse. Even untreated symptoms will vanish in 2 or 3 weeks, but gonorrhea will still be with you, silently at work. Gonorrhea is a scarring disease. It can scar the urethral canal so that the rest of your life you will often need to get it corrected just to urinate. And that hurts like mad. Gonorrhea can reach the testicles and cause sterility. It can do a lot more. But why take chances? It's rapidly and painlessly cured. Women will probably not even know when they get gonorrhea. There could be a mild pain in the lower abdomen. There might be a slight discharge. But don't count on it. Some health authorities say that in big cities, 1 out of every 10 women between 15 and 24 is walking around with gonorrhea and doesn't even know it. What happens if it's not cured? The infection may enter the abdomen. This may require surgery. Gonorrhea may be the leading cause of sterility in women. You can't become a mother when your ovaries and your fallopian tubes have been badly scarred by gonorrhea. And gonorrhea is probably the top reason women must have their wombs removed, surgically, later in life. Gonorrhea can enter your bloodstream and cause problems such as arthritis and infections in your brain and heart. Men who have gonorrhea symptoms should see a doctor right now. If you don't know a doctor, visit your county health department. Maybe there's a VD clinic or a free clinic in your area. Tell every woman with whom you've had contact within the 2 weeks before your symptoms appeared to see a doctor. She may be infected and not know it. Ladies who suspect they've been exposed to gonorrhea should see a doctor right now. If you've got it, you probably don't know. He can probably tell you. But you may never know until too late that you have gonorrhea unless some man tells you he has it. Don't get mad when a man says he thinks you're infected. He's doing you a favor by telling you. The treatment for gonorrhea is simple. Just a shot or a handful of pills. But remember, after you're cured, you can catch gonorrhea again and again. There is no natural immunity. Here's the organism that causes syphilis. It's called a spirochete. You get syphilis from contact with the body of an infected sex partner. Like gonorrhea, syphilis has many nicknames. Pox, Louis, bad blood, syph, haircut, and old Joe. In men, the first sign of syphilis appears about 2 to 6 weeks after infection. It's a sore where the infection entered the body. It's called a chancre. The sore is likely to be so insignificant that no attention is paid to it. It might be mistaken for a pimple. In a woman, the first sign of syphilis is usually located inside her. She can't see it. It doesn't hurt, and she doesn't know it's there. About 3 weeks after the chancre, both men and women develop other symptoms. You may get a fever. You may get a sore throat. You may feel just like you have the flu. Sometimes there is a rash on all or part of the body. But that's all there is to it. The symptoms all go away without medical treatment. After that, you'll feel fine. You can do everything you ever did before. And in 85 out of every 100 cases, you'll never see another symptom. Great, isn't it? Except that your lifespan has been greatly reduced. But let's look at the 15 out of every 100 who aren't lucky enough just to have their lives shortened. Further complications may appear as early as 2 years after infection. Syphilis is carried by the blood and lodges in various organs. If it attacks the central nervous system, it may cause insanity, severe crippling, paralysis, or blindness. If it attacks the heart, it can cause death. The unborn child of a syphilitic mother can be infected. The child may be born dead, or deformed, or grow up with other effects of syphilis. You know what? At any point, a doctor can cure syphilis, almost immediately. But the clock is ticking there, too. Every day, untreated syphilis does a little more damage. Why let it? The moment a man suspects syphilis, he should see a doctor. And be sure to tell every woman he may have gotten it from or given it to. He'll be doing himself a favor. Look at it this way. Women may be the unknowing carriers of syphilis and gonorrhea. Men have a better chance of knowing when they have VD. Each woman kept ignorant of her infection may pass it along to another man who passes it along to another woman. It's possible to get VD again just because you didn't speak up. Don't forget, VD can be caught over again many times. Treatment of VD is quick. If you don't get treatment, you're asking for pain, misery, or death. It's all up to you. P.S. VD can be prevented. Ask your doctor.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday, the end of week 10 of us doing this lunchtime screening, showing old 16mm educational films. I'm Skip Alzheimer of AV Geeks, and thank you for joining us for lunch. That last film was a lot of silhouettes of people's private parts in the name of talking about venereal disease. What's interesting about that film is that that was animated by Ralph McQuarrie, and Ralph McQuarrie was one of the production artists on Star Wars, the original Star Wars. And I actually have somewhere, I just found recently, this Star Wars sketchbook that came out when the first Star Wars came out that has his artwork, and it's pretty great. Today we are joined by my longtime friend, good friend, Melissa Dollman. Melissa, hi, how are you?
Hi, another good time friend. After
Yeah.
a meeting.
We are all so very, very informal here. But I've been trying to have guests on and folks that have connections or have films that we have talked about in the past, films from my collection. And you were on the list, and you were joining us from Palm Springs, California, but you were a student still in Chapel Hill. Is that correct?
I am still, yep. I was working remotely before the whole thing went remote, so the transition wasn't so hard, but yeah.
All right.
And I'm hanging out in 1954 here in the background.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Look at that. Yeah. And I have superimposed my archive behind me. This is actually the archive that you came down to Raleigh when you were still living in Massachusetts, I think, right?
Cambridge. Mm-hmm.
And you came down around 4th of July, and you helped me catalog a bunch of the films that were behind me.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
I think it was over the July. We went and bought fireworks, and I had lived in the South one time when I was in 8th grade, and so it was really fun just to go.
Yeah, so you got grimy with a bunch of films, and you shot off fireworks. So that was really great. So let's talk a little bit about Carol Lane, the how we both came to Carol Lane, the enigmatic Carol Lane.
Yes. When I was living up in Cambridge, I worked at the Schlesinger Library at Harvard, and I was running the film series there. And one year, we didn't have any money to run a film series, so I was going through our collections to see what we could show, and we decided to do a night on travel films. And I knew that we had this woman's collection named Caroline Iverson Ackerman. And she had a film in her collection, and I knew her as Carol Lane. Like, we had a film, and I watched it, and we had pictures, and all this ephemera around her. And then, but I also had your disc. One of your discs that had how to pack a suitcase, which I now I understand and have discovered documentation that's how to pack a bag. But same thing. They used to call them bags, but and Carol's would call them bags. Anyway. And your film had a blonde, like a kind of typical 1950s television kind of blonde Carol Lane, and mine was a sort of more 1940s looking brunette, kind of redheadish brunette, very different styles of and I was just like, what is going on? Why do you have one and why do I have another? And that just led me down a rabbit hole.
Well, let's watch this film, the what I call How to Pack a Suitcase.
And and I've identified this woman. Her name's Sherry Baker, and she was actually one of the women who used to go around as Carol Lane.
So she's not Carol Lane. She's actually somebody else. This is
Carol
where
Lane.
it gets weird.
Yes, exactly.
So
yes.
I found this on eBay, and it was an instructional film on how to pack a suitcase, and it was obviously cut out of something. And so I don't know what it was cut out of. There was nothing to mention what it was. It was just somebody had pulled out maybe from a show or something, like all the ads, and was selling those separately. So here's How to Pack a Suitcase or How to Pack a Bag. Let's watch.
Hello, I'm Carol Lane. I do research to discover ways to make automobile travel easier and more pleasant for you. You know, many people tell me they find packing a difficult task. Well, it needn't be if you plan properly. Here is what I am going to take with me on my next trip, and it all fits easily into one 21-inch suitcase. This is called an overnighter, but actually I can carry enough in it for a week or more. The first thing to do is to make a list of all the articles that you will need. This avoids forgetting essentials or taking too much. Here is a checklist I have devised for travel. I pack my heaviest items on a level layer at the bottom of the suitcase. This helps to keep the rest of my clothing from being wrinkled. My shoes inside my drizzle boots keep other items from becoming soiled. My travel alarm fits securely between the shoes. An umbrella has a collapsible handle. Run your belts around the inside of the suitcase. This takes less room and prevents crushing. My cosmetics and bottles are safe from spillage in this plastic bag. I use a regular refrigerator container for this. Bobby pins, a sewing kit, aspirin, a roll of Scotch tape, which can come in mighty handy to repair a hem, and all the little extras that we can't seem to get along without go into another plastic bag for easy finding. In my job as Women's Travel Director of Shell Oil Company, I always have to appear fresh and neat at a moment's notice, so I take along a few practical items to help me accomplish this. I carry my own collapsible ironing board. It's lightweight cork and it won't heat through. It's the motorist's best friend. My travel iron, an expandable clothesline which requires no pins, a scrub mitt which is practical for linen collars or white gloves, soap flakes in a plastic cigarette case. I carry my own washcloth inside my shower cap to keep it from dampening other articles. A sweater is a must for cool weather. Roll your sweaters and other knitwear navy style to prevent creases. The rolled sweater secures the bottom layer, which then looks like this. Proper accessories will greatly extend your wardrobe. I've included a stole, several scarves, and extra gloves. Inside the gloves, I place my stockings to prevent snags. Then from my silver drawer, I borrowed this flannel spoon case. It has wide pockets, which I label, making it easy to find any article of jewelry quickly. It prevents scratching or tarnishing. And best of all, it packs flat. These plastic sheets are a little trick of my own. If you want something at the bottom of your suitcase, you simply lift the layers out. These are made from sheets of plastic which are available by the yard. I cut them to fit my suitcase, sew handles on, label them, and then I have my own personal filing system. The next layer is my sportswear. Pedal pushers, a pair of shorts, and a matching blouse, which goes with my travel suit. I've included a two-piece silk print costume for dressier occasions. And this is the way I pack a suit to prevent wrinkles. Place the skirt flat with one end hanging over the side of the case. Button the jacket and place the collar in the center back of the suitcase. Fold the sleeves across. Fold over the end of the skirt and then the bottom of the jacket. In this way, I think you will find your suit will arrive wrinkle-free. On the top layer, I place underclothing and nightwear. All these articles, including my robe, are made from one of the new miracle fabrics which travel and launder so well.
So, Melissa, when I got this film, immediately I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, films are usually a solution to a problem. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is the problem here? Like, okay, so Shell Oil, they make gasoline. So why? I mean, it seems like the cars were huge back then. So why are we caring about how efficient and concise a woman can pack a suitcase? Is this to counter the stereotype that women, pack like their entire closet? Or like, I had all these questions. I wasn't sure what was going on. And also, Carol Lane. I mean, when I first talked to you about Carol Lane, or you brought it up to me, why is there different Carol Lanes?
Well, it's a bit of a long history, but I'll tackle the first part. is that the suitcase demonstration was something that she would do live. It was like whenever you read these descriptions, these kind of leaders they would send out before she would go to a town to sort of announce. And I've looked at them; they were pre-scripted. There were templates that would send a women's page editor, and then she would plug in who the hosts were and who the hosting club and all that. So this was like, I'm pretty certain this was part of one of 5 films that the Shell Oil made for Carol Lane specifically, were her techniques. They made 5 films that they produced around 54, 55, and I think this is part of one, and I think it was for TV because she was on TV a lot when she would go to different areas, and she is 24, 25 different women in Canada and the United States. And Shell kind of, for a while, their PR efforts were really geographically separated. There was a California office and there was a New York office, and for a while there was St. Louis. And so those 2 coasts would hire their Carol Lanes, and they would split the country in half. So Sherry Baker, who's playing here, she was a West Coast. She was from San Francisco, and she played the West Coast one. So, but the kind of I think the packing the suitcase, that people just found it so delightful that she just did it every single time she visited a place. It's really just a fun demonstration. I don't know. I think also it was a little bit about like how do you encourage women not to feel like you were saying, not to be bogged down. Like you can just hit the road and get going, which is funny when considering if you look at the picture behind me, she's in the very, very, very back. Like this is actually a Carol Lane. You can't see her because there's like the dais back there. But she would talk to women like this, and these weren't necessarily sometimes they were working women, but they weren't always. Sometimes they were just housewives. Not that that's not a job in itself, but she wanted them to help plan vacations, and I think part of that was convincing their husbands, like, oh my God, this is going to be so difficult. They're going to have to pack all this stuff. And her message was, it doesn't have to be. Like, you can hit the road with your girlfriends, you can budget, you can stretch your vacation days from the 2 weeks to include the weekends. So I think it was like, how do you get on the road fast?
Right. So how many Carol Anns were there at any given time? Like you said, there was 25 across North America, but were there just, like, is this over a period of time? Or is this all divided by space so that it's possible that there would be 3 Carol Anns in California that were, doing the ladies' club circuit?
Just one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, and one in Canada. Mostly, all over Canada, really. Right. Toronto, Montreal, in the Ottawa region. So they would have one going, and then I found documentation of when one Carol Lane would train the other. So sometimes they would appear together, but in that case, then someone would be Carol Lane and one of them would be her assistant. But I was like, I know who that is. She became Carol Lane like a year later. So I really honed my detective skills.
So why did Shell Oil care? Why did they do this was obviously a big concerted effort. So why did Shell Oil care to create this? I mean, the only parallel I can think of is Betty Crocker. Like there's a Betty Crocker that, was a big deal. Why did Shell care to make a Carol Ann?
So I have mapped where the Carol Lanes went and where Shell was trying to open a territory, and they overlap. So first I mapped everywhere where they were going, and then I found an old map from 1957, and then I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to start mapping all of their refineries and their offices. Not the gas stations, that would be insane, but everything else they did. I mapped it, and I was like, oh my God, where she went is where the territories they were trying to open and where they were trying to ingratiate themselves into a community. So it was about sending, and Iverson, who I discovered at the Schlesinger Library, the first Carol Lane, to my mind, she invented the character, and she was the first person to say, we need to tap that women's club market. Like that's who we need to get, and then these women will encourage their husbands to or to drive or take themselves as professional single women out on the road. So they were opening territories, and she was helping to open this. And then that's why she doesn't go very often to like Montana and Idaho, because they weren't doing a lot of business there. South Dakota, where my mom lives, I found a couple of visits, and they were usually tourist areas.
Interesting.
And there was a few Midwestern carols, and they kind of knew where to go in the Midwest.
So you caught the Carol Lane bug, and this is part of what your PhD is about, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And like in my collections, you sent me the actual film, which I'm so delighted by, because I can't even show you. Behind that screen is just a freakish amount of Carol Lane ephemera. So they actually have a film. It's just, I was so delighted to receive that package.
Yeah, I figured that you have given it more of a life than I could ever give it. So yes, I'm happy
we teamed
to do
up
that.
together.
Yeah, it's rare that I give films to people. Like, it's you and the Library of Congress. Those are the only two entities that I've given films to. Usually they end up with me and they stay with me until I die. So let's talk about this next film. It's a beautiful film, Destination Earth. Like, just a real quick, why did you pick this film?
I picked it because one of Carol Lane's bosses in the PR department, H.L. Curtis, he was instrumental in getting the American Petroleum Institute's, I have to always read this, Oil Industry Information Committee, the OIIC, to get them to start producing films, PR films. So that was her boss, and I'm pretty sure he was instrumental in getting some of hers made, or his successor. But so Destination Earth is brought to you by the American Petroleum Institute.
Yeah, and this
really
one's a Lulu.
It's Lulu.
It talks about free enterprise, and it all has a lot to do with oil. So let's watch Destination Earth.
Thank you for this unsolicited testimonial. And now, by special permission of the Commander-in-Chief, me, here is Mars' first space explorer, Colonel Cosmic.
I can't tell you how happy I am to see your smiling faces once more. First, let me say that this trip was made possible only by our dauntless chief, Og the Magnificent, introducer of Og Power, which runs most of our industry, an inventor of Og Speed, which doubles the original Og Power. A short time ago, the master was having trouble with the state limousine, He had, of course, developed the explosive charge. But it was inclined to get a little out of hand, just slight. And, of course, there was always the problem of friction. Parts rubbing together, heating up, and causing all sorts of trouble. But our leader was undaunted. He immediately ordered our first expedition into space to bring back the secret of how other planets got their state limousines to run smoothly. The target was picked with painstaking scientific accuracy. Destination, Earth. You all know with what eagerness I volunteered for the mission, and with what confidence I took off. I took careful bearings and set out for my goal. It seemed no time till I was approaching a country of Earth called, the United States of America. I set her down like a feather. What's all the racket? Naturally, I protected government property by making the saucer invisible. They're after the chickens, Ma! Though the natives showed great interest in me, I decided to make myself invisible, too. Seeing moving lights in the distance, I headed for them. What phenomenal luck! I had landed close to what seemed to be an endless procession of state limousines. They moved quickly, and yet with fantastic smoothness. I just had to get a closer look at one of those Earthmobiles. Just as I thought. Not only smooth and efficient, but powerful as well. I watched them for hours. Great Ganymede, they were superb. I just couldn't help comparing them with ours, if you call that a comparison. Surely these vehicles must be the property of the highest officials. I was wrong. It seems that almost everybody in this country has one of those, they call them automobiles. They use them for transportation, for business, for pleasure. They use them for all sorts of things. I found that these vehicles gather at places called service stations, where they are fed, lubricated, that's how they beat friction, and given the finest care. The source of their nourishment was something called petroleum. A power source like that must be a highly prized state secret. I had to find out about it. Perhaps the secret lay within this government archives building. It was heavily guarded, but casting discretion to the winds, I walked boldly inside. Their code was remarkably easy to break. They merely substituted the word oil for petroleum. And I soon got hold of a veritable mine of classified information. I began to assimilate the material. I soon found out that though petroleum products are easily found anywhere, petroleum itself is a very elusive substance. You have to search for it constantly in all the most likely and unlikely places with all kinds of scientific devices. When they figure they found a good spot, they drill a hole in the ground called an oil well, for almost all oil lies far beneath the surface of the earth. These wells go down thousands of feet and cost a lot of money to drill. But that's no guarantee that they're going to find oil. Matter of fact, in exploratory drilling, only 1 well in 9 finds any oil at all. Only 1 in 44 recovers enough oil to pay for itself. And only 1 in almost 1,000 makes a major discovery. Pretty big odds. Yet America's proved reserves, the oil supplies still underground, have kept increasing steadily. I couldn't imagine how this ever-increasing supply of oil was achieved until I found out that there's not just one, but thousands of oil companies, all competing with each other to discover and develop new sources of oil. For believe it or not, in the USA, anyone who is willing to risk it can drill for oil. But oil discovery is only part of the story. Once they get oil out of the ground, it has to be moved through pipelines, on ships, or in tank cars, to fantastic processing plants called refineries. Crude oil goes in, and great Jupiter, the things that come out. Gasoline, for example, the most efficient mobile power source on Earth. That was the stuff that powered all those cars and trucks. And asphalt, which makes smooth, durable roads. It seems that oil not only runs cars, it even gives them something to run on. Another oil product is the diesel fuel, which runs giant trains across the nation. In winter, fuel oil made from petroleum brings warmth and comfort to millions of homes. And still other fuels help defend America's shores and skies. From refineries also come the lubricating oils and greases that keep the wheels turning in America. But that still isn't all. Crude oil, like everything else, is made up of billions of tiny molecules. And using the magic of research, oil companies compete with each other in taking the petroleum molecule apart and rearranging it into, well, you name it, fabrics, toothbrushes, tires, insecticides, cosmetics, weed killers, a whole galaxy of things to make a better life on Earth. And you know, it isn't just oil companies that try to outdo each other, competing for the customer's dollar. The same story is true of almost every successful business enterprise in America. The result? A higher standard of living in the USA than in any other country on the whole planet. At last, the secret was mine. And now, to get proof of my discovery, smuggled past the border guards. In spite of my infinite precautions, one of them became suspicious and gave the alarm.
Come back for the eggs, did you? Yeah.
And so, with the fond farewells of the natives ringing in my ears, I took off once again for Mars. My landing was a little bumpy, but I saved my precious cargo. Yes, I brought the secrets back with me, and here they are. The big secret is, of course, oil, which has brought a better life to all the people in the USA. But the key to making oil work for everybody is competition. Fellow Martians, I thank you.
Very interesting, Colonel. Oil, huh? Sounds splendid. But that, what was it? Competition. Not our kind of thing at all. Why, competition is downright unmartial.
Oil? You'll have oil for everybody. That's all we need. Oh, boy, oil.
Look at them. You know what this means, Cosmic?
You bet I do, Og. It means that you're through. So why don't you get lost? Yes, the real secret is not only a great source of energy, but also the freedom to make it work for everybody. And if you have both of these things, any goal is possible. It's Destination Unlimited.
All right, we're back. So yeah, Melissa, mute your sound.
Okay,
This is
got
just like, turn down your radio.
That's exactly what I thought. Right. We're just going
So, that film is awesome. I like it. I like the Sutherland, John Sutherland's work. He's done other work that's related to free enterprise, and free market economy stuff, and also kind of anti-communist, but also a little anti-labor in a way, because it's talking about the deregulation and to keep the free market free from legislation, which was a kind of a post-war World War II trying to roll back some of the things that Roosevelt's administration had instituted.
Definitely. The oil industry definitely, like when you read about some of their worries as far as PR during Roosevelt, man, they came back with hammers
Yep.
after the war. Like, we have some damage control to do here. And I think Caroline's part of that effort as well.
Oh yeah. She was anti-red.
Well, yeah, I did a secret. I'm probably not going to make it part of my project, but I looked up what all their political affiliations that I could find, and they lean towards the right, most of them, not all of them.
Well, that's Eisenhower's right versus
right.
So you said that there was off when we were off camera that there was actually cartoons of Carol Lane.
Not animated cartoons. They were cartoons, comics rather, in the newspaper. And actually, that's what's interesting. Well, I can go into it later. But I had discovered that this woman named Arabelle Wheatley, who's an illustrator, she had developed the Carol Lane style. And I found a document in Art Direction in 1957 that said that Arabelle Wheatley, is responsible for the look. But I was like, okay, well, that's fine. But there's this other kind of comics that are associated with Carol Lane, and they are much more traditional 1950s kind of action comic, not like pow, but sort of just kind of sketched in, and have all these weird little narratives within or vignettes within the same cartoon. And I kept digging, and I kind of forgot about it for a while. I just kind of dropped my ski poles and kind of went to leave it alone for a while. And then as I was looking up more information about the Oil Industry Information Committee, I found a whole page of drawings that were just the same as these other ones I couldn't identify, and they were about the oil industry. And I was like, oh my God, there he is. And then I went to this other rabbit hole and figured out this guy named Clem Gretter, and he had done Ripley's Believe It or Not, and he had done all these kind of pulpy novels. He wrote a super trippy parapsychology book. He was just a nut, and I thought, well, I found him. So that was pretty fun. But Arabelle Wheatley has a connection to one of these films that I picked as well. I have to think about what it was.
So when did Carol Ann start? When was that created? Like her persona and the campaign.
I love that you keep calling her Carol Ann, which is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carol Lane. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just totally stuck in like Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Carol Lane. Yes.
Ackerman. She created the character in 1947. In her personal paper, she acknowledges that she developed the character. First, they were going to use her name. Mm-hmm. She went around just for a little while as Caroline Iverson, and then I found this letter where she says, I signed my contract, I convinced them not to copyright my name, trademark my name. We developed a name, Carol Lane, to go forward with this character, and then she started playing that character. But it was from 47, and it wound down in 74, kind of during the oil crisis.
Wow.
I found some documentation where they said, we just can't. It just seems unseemly, or we can't afford it, or something, to tell people to drive their cars when they can't afford any gasoline. So it wound down then, and they never. Who replaced her weirdly was a character named Answer Man, and he's been played by some kind of famous character actors whose names escape me right now. But a couple years later, same kind of thing that she was doing, which was advising people, giving them techniques about care, auto care, and mapping and all that stuff. And then it became a man, and he was in commercials.
I seem to remember some of the Shell Answer Man commercials. Yeah.
So he kind of took her place a few years later, and she never came back.
Interesting.
And he didn't do live events. The live event thing is what makes her weird.
Interesting.
So
let's talk about what the next film is. You picked this one, and this one, I'm cheating a little bit. This isn't actually from my archive. This is from the Prelinger archive.
Thanks, Rick.
But I digitized this for him, or he digitized it, and I put it online for him. And I should say, as an aside, right now I'm putting up like 400 home movies that the Prelinger Library has digitized at archive.org. So there's an opportunity to see lots of interesting stuff. He's totally into home movies now. But anyways, let's talk about Petroleum at the New York World's Fair.
Yeah. The reason why I picked this was I actually watched it the other day, and Shell. So this film kind of takes place in the Petroleum Building, the big kind of marketing building it had there, and I've seen really interesting photographs of these lovely display of like the city of the future that Shell, and it's been sort of it's included in books and stuff, photographs of this exhibit, which I am pretty certain was in this building. But I was looking throughout the film to see if I could, because in other periods they've had a big building to themselves, like a big shell. They did that like in San Francisco World's Fair, I think. So I just think it's a really interesting, more propaganda about oil, and I'm pretty sure that exhibit was in that building. So.
And this is the 39 World's Fair, correct? Not the 64.
Yeah.
Right.
39.
So this is before World War II, and this is where the Futurama, GM had their Futurama, and all these other really fascinating things. So let's watch Petroleum at the New York World's Fair.
American industry on parade at the biggest show in history. A $150 million show that played for 2 summers to an audience of millions of people from all parts of the country. To people who learned many things they never knew before about steel and railroads, automobiles and aviation, and about the importance of the one great industry on which all these others must depend for continued operation, petroleum. Here were gathered exhibits representative of the entire industry. No one company being featured in any way. Exhibits so designed and presented with such dramatic and novel effect that the visitor might trace the development of this great industry from the discovery of the first oil well to the varied and complex uses of oil today, and how it affects all of us in our daily lives. Far from being a mere shelter for a display, the petroleum building in itself was carefully designed to focus attention upon the industry. The great triangular structure resting upon 4 huge petroleum tanks was a streamlined modernization of a cooling tower. The walls rose 80 feet above the ground, each side measuring 200 feet, and the concave wall design included effective night lighting so as to keep the brilliant blue color equally attractive both night and day. The observation roof afforded a superior vantage point from which to view the fairgrounds. A modern, well-equipped restaurant, deep, comfortable lounges and chairs, and tables conveniently placed provided rest and relaxation for visitors. While on all three sides, the movement, color, and life of the fair's vast panorama lay before the visitor's eyes, and one could linger and view the dazzling sights at leisure. The strange modernistic buildings, forward in design and bold in color, housing the wonders of industry, science, art, education, commerce, and communications. The courts, fountains, and colorful displays of flowers and shrubs. The flags, the music, the endless stream of people, a sight to challenge the mind and stimulate the imagination. A modern miracle come to life on what was once a barren flatland. And towering above it all, the highest oil derrick in the world, rearing its giant framework against the sky, attention compelling in its structure, an exact duplicate of the thousands of oil derricks to be found in oil fields all over the world, from mountains to coastal plains, wherever man seeks to find nature's petroleum deposits. This derrick and well beneath it were constructed in order that every detail of modern oil drilling methods might be demonstrated to the public at the fair. 200 feet in height, it weighed nearly 40 tons. Its base was 34 feet square and could support a load of 1,000,000 pounds. The well beneath it, 440 feet deep, was bottomed in solid granite, cased off with a steel pipe and cemented from top to bottom. While from the crown, Old Glory kept proud watch. A sign directed visitors to the derrick exhibit and the demonstration shows, which were put on many times a day, giving thousands who had never seen an oil well some idea of the great labor and cost involved in the production of oil, and depicting the work of the men who bring up petroleum from the depths of the earth. As visitors crowded around the derrick, Wildcat Ross, the announcer for station PETE, the Petroleum Broadcasting System, delivered a lecture on the rotary method of drilling for oil. The equipment was described in every detail of the operation. The derrick man, his working position on this derrick was 110 feet above the derrick floor. Hooking on his safety belt, he rides the drill pipe up into the derrick where the pipe is stacked, while the announcer described his job up there in latching or unlatching the elevators on the pipe and how he racks it in the derrick. Each member of the drilling crew, as well as the announcer, was recruited from major oil fields in Texas or Oklahoma. Experienced oil men who, by their teamwork, their expert handling of this equipment, gave the audience a realistic view of actual operations. Here are the giant rotary tongs and the huge winches suspended on cables with counterbalance weights beneath the derrick floor. And here the intent faces of the crowds of people who gathered round the derrick at every show. People who had never seen an oil well drilled before and probably never would again. Their deep and absorbed interest is indicative of the fact that this was a never-to-be-forgotten experience, which gave thousands of people a new concept of the actual production of oil. They saw the diesel-electric unit of 700 horsepower, 500,000 watts of electricity capable of drilling oil wells to depths exceeding 15,000 feet, almost 3 miles down. The man at the controls, who is the head driller, boss of the job at all times, and the success or failure of the oil well depended on his experience and judgment. Yes, the crowds followed every step of the procedure. People from all walks of life drawn here from all over the land. People learning about petroleum. All the day-by-day procedure in drilling for oil as employed by the oil companies in the great oil fields was reenacted. There were descriptions of the pipe being used and the safety methods employed in handling this heavy equipment. As the derrick man rode down with the last stand of drill pipe, the narrator described the various rock formations through which the drill must penetrate and the climatic and working conditions found in oil fields from Pennsylvania to California. Here the spectators learned something of the operation of the drill stem, the swivel unit, and the speed of drilling. The functions of the different parts of equipment shown on the drill floor were described, as well as the process of pumping mud through the rotary hose, the number of pounds of mud pumped per minute, the work of the gun perforator, and how it operates. As the drill was lowered in the derrick, the narrator described the drill collar and the construction of the drilling bit itself, the flexibility of the pipe and the speed of drilling, and how wells could be sunk at angles under lakes, rivers, oceans, as well as tall buildings. The crowds followed every detail as the drill went into action. They heard a description of the electric photographic outfit and its ability to picture the bottom of the drill hole to permit directional drilling. They heard of the difficulties involved in fishing for lost drill pipe, drilling bits and other equipment, and how the drilling bits are replaced and again lowered to the bottom of the hole. Slowly the crowds passed by each exhibit, saw the giant pump capable of lifting oil from a depth of 8,000 feet. Competent geologists were on duty to answer all questions on geology and formations, and to exhibit the complete geological display. Every hour during the day, the colorful and intriguing motion picture, Oil Can and Does, was shown on a great screen in one angle of the Hall of Industry. Plot and action were carried out by a puppet character called Petroleum, and a large number of supplementary puppets called Petroleum Cousins. Every show played to large audiences, creating goodwill for the petroleum industry and its products by this interesting and amusing method of illustrating the use of petroleum in our normal everyday life, and what would happen to the modern world if the supply of petroleum were to come to an end. In fact, there was an interesting and colorful exhibit of some kind always in progress in the petroleum building. Exhibits linking petroleum to the world of today and tomorrow. In this little show about the use of petroleum on the farm and in the home, hundreds of thousands of visitors to the petroleum building learned of countless uses of petroleum quite unfamiliar to them. The housewife represented the average American who either does not know or does not realize the many ways in which petroleum is used in the home and on the farm. From the dialogue between the oil salesman and the housewife, visitors to this exhibit learned that petroleum is used throughout the construction of the house, from the asphalt in the cellar to the shingles on the roof, that modern homes of today are waterproofed and weatherproofed through the use of petroleum products. They learned that petroleum is in building paper, in varnish, in paint, that it preserves wood and inhibits rust. The salesman explained to the housewife that oil goes into insecticides and fertilizers, that oil is needed in cars, trucks, and tractors to keep them operating smoothly and efficiently. Visitors learned that oil produces kerosene and diesel fuel used in farm equipment, and that it goes into the making of rubber tires and is also used in refrigeration. That even the cosmetics the lady wears contain oil, her lipstick and rouge, her creams and lotions, her nail polish and perfume. At last, the salesman convinces the housewife that petroleum meets many real needs in her home. The second show presented to the public demonstrated the importance of petroleum in transportation. The bride and groom, starting on a modern honeymoon in an airplane powered by high-octane gasoline, recounted a history of travel from the time of old Dobbin until the present day. As the couple pointed to the different exhibits which were lighted in turn, they told of the chronological development of various methods of transportation which went hand in hand with refining developments during the last 80 years, drawing comparisons between transportation methods at different time stages. Here the public learned of the drilling of the first oil well 80 years ago and the first uses of oil in transportation, and the great strides in the development of automobile and aviation engines which have been made possible by petroleum research and improved refining methods. As the skit concluded, the couple emphasized the improvement in oil affected by research and mentioned the benefits of knockless engine operation, increased acceleration, and better lubrication which the motoring public enjoys today. The third petroleum show was based on a discussion of the gas dollar and where it goes. The attendant explained to his customer how every penny of the dollar she pays for gasoline is spent. Here the public learned of the many and varied taxes which the oil industry pays, taxes totaling 25 cents of every gas dollar. Of the huge payrolls in the oil industry, representing 28 cents of every gas dollar. That 10 cents of every gas dollar goes for service stations for the benefit of the motoring public. that the costs of pipelines, wells, and refineries absorbed 34.5 cents of each dollar. That management claims only half a penny of the gas dollar, and that the remaining 2 cents represents profits. Profits which are returned to the people who have invested their savings in the oil industry. One of the most unusual and convincing displays was that of petroleum in industry. The mechanic and his son, conversing in the machine shop, discussed and emphasized the many uses of oil in keeping the machinery of industry well oiled and running smoothly. Grinders, shapers, lathes, drill press, and an airplane motor were prominently displayed, and visitors learned about the many uses of oil beside that of lubrication of machinery. They learned about oil and water mixtures used for cooling, mixtures achieved by chemical research, which make it possible to cool and lubricate work simultaneously. They learned of the uses of oil in hydraulic pressure and the accuracy necessary in internal grinders used for airplane engines, which must be accurate to within a 25,000th of an inch. They learned that oil pumped under pressure assures smooth action and accuracy in this delicate operation. They learned of the special importance of lubricants for the superchargers, which spin in airplane motors 30,000 times per minute. The work of the world powered and cushioned by oil. All the little-known facts about oils for industrial lubrication were presented in this exhibit. The only team of oxen at the New York World's Fair, drawing an old-fashioned wagon, illustrated transportation in bygone days. As the wagon makes its slow, laborious way along the road, a vivid contrast could be drawn between it and the transportation methods of today. We see the huge creaking wheels lubricated with the first crude forms of grease, and could compare these with our modern lubricating equipment. Water wheels and windmills portrayed primitive methods of developing power prior to the 19th century. Accustomed as we are to modern high-speed machines, it is difficult to imagine that this huge water wheel was once an important source of power. On this beautiful relief map, the public saw natural gas lines, crude oil lines, pumping stations, refineries, and derricks light up as a commentator traced the history of oil in our country from the time of Colonel Drake at Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859 to the present time. It was pointed out that each of the 900 little green derricks on the map represented an entire oil field, not just one well, and that each field thus designated has hundreds of wells. Depth of wells and the total amount of crude oil produced in the United States and other information of interest was supplied by a scroll at the rear of the map, which was synchronized with the operation of the lights on the map. The public was able to study the network of 280,000 miles of underground pipelines, which transport the crude oil safely from the fields to the refineries, and from the refineries to different points of distribution and consumption. They learned of the movement of oil not only by pipeline, but by tank cars, ocean tankers, and barges, and that 1/3 of all the freight tonnage handled in the United States today is composed of or related to petroleum products. As the map darkened and the lights representing derricks, oil fields, pipelines, and refineries were shown in vivid colors, the visitors were able to get a comprehensive idea of the enormous extent of petroleum production, transportation, and distribution. A $14 billion industry which has helped make the American standard of living the highest in the world. Another phase of the vast petroleum industry was illustrated to the public by the model miniature oil refinery, where a lecturer described 4 different ways of refining crude oil. Here in front of the chart showing refining methods of technical research, the public learned of the ceaseless research which has resulted in countless new petroleum products for the world of today and tomorrow. Here the visitor could trace the course of the crude oil from the time it entered the refinery until it emerged as many different byproducts. They saw a model miniature refinery, accurately worked out to scale, typical of modern refineries in use today, capable of refining any type of crude oil and producing all of the products which we now get from petroleum. The narrator described the storage of crude oil in the huge tanks bordering the refinery, traced the oil through the crude pipe stills to the bubble towers or fractionizing units, then followed the cuts of gas oil through the complete refining processes to the finished products. The wall charts also demonstrated clearly to fair visitors a few of the many intricate and scientific processes by which petroleum is refined. The cracking process illustrated the method by which refiners obtained a higher gasoline content from their crude base stock, as high as 60% content from the proper stock. Visitors learned about the work of the absorption units, whose trays filled with absorption oil absorbs the heavy structures of gas present. Each step in the process of polymerization, dewaxing and purifying was graphically and simply illustrated and explained in a manner comprehensive to all. And as night falls and the sky bursts into light and color, we see the petroleum buildings set like a great blue jewel in the night, reflected in the waters of the lake surrounding the perisphere. While from the roof, there is spread before us the spectacular display of water, light, flame, and color, the thrilling pageant of the greatest spectacle of our time.
Sorry about that. We're back. So
Isn't it beautiful?
yeah, it's really, really something. And I was saying that there's two things about this. It's the World's Fair, 1939 World's Fair, which is just glorious. Everything is so optimistic and super happy and super corporate. And then, this is a cheerleading film for the petroleum industry.
Yeah, exactly. It reminded me of two things. Well, one thing in particular is that that my favorite, maybe one of my favorite documentaries ever, the Bathtubs Over Broadway, about corporate theater. So I think this is also a really and in those corporate theater productions, they would often entail the employees themselves would be the actors. And Shell had one for a very brief time. It was like 50 to 52-ish in New York City. They had a playhouse, and I found very little except for like actors saying that they had participated in this playhouse. But yeah, it was really a big thing at the time to do these big theater productions. But also, I thought it was funny that maybe I've never told you this, that I never had a car until really the last couple of years, from age 20 to a few years ago. Wow. So quite a while, I'll just say. I didn't even have a car. So this is all like kind of like studying up. Like this is kind of a world that I didn't know much about because I had never visited very many gas stations in my life.
Right. The novelty it's still a novelty to get gas in your car for you.
Exactly.
For the rest of us, it is just the most tedious task you can imagine. But for you, it's a glorious path.
It's research for me, going to the gas station.
So you're working on this project. Do you have an online kind of work in progress about Carol Lane?
I do. It's until I defend the dissertation next spring. It's not open to the public, but I do have a video walkthrough.
Okay.
I made in February. That's not the most up to date, but it's pretty up to date.
Okay.
About how it goes, and I'm happy to. Do you want me to drop it in now, or?
Yeah, if you could type it in the comments, and then I'll copy it over to YouTube. I should have thought about that while we were off camera, but
yeah, just take me a second.
Yeah. But while you do that, let me just say thanks, Melissa, for tuning in and for showing us what your research is about and kind of adding a backstory to some of these films. And thank you, everybody out in the world, for tuning in on this Friday. We'll pick this up again on Monday. That will be the start of our 11th week doing this. And one of the films that I will be showing that you picked that we just don't have time for is Visual Perception Eye Habits, which is a film by AAA, which is pretty awesome, actually. When you mentioned that film, I was like, oh yeah, I want to show that film. We didn't have time for it this time, but we'll definitely show it next week. But did you enter in the thing?
Okay. Yep.
All right, let me. So this is a site walkthrough of what you're working on, specifically related to the Carol Lane project, which it's really fascinating. And this is why one of the reasons I enjoy collecting films is because they are literally a tip of an iceberg. Well, not literally, but they are a tip of an iceberg to something, the whole world. So when I collect films about, niche industry things, then it's like this little tiny glimpse into a world that I know nothing about. And, certainly it seems like Carol Lane was a gateway drug for you.
Indeed. I mean, no, your film and the Iverson collection, the Ackerman collection, just sent me down
Nice.
an obsessive road, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is, ultimately, we call this a digital humanities project, correct? That's right. Yeah. So this is, and besides working with you, I have worked with other digital humanities majors who are doing research on a variety of different things. And they come to me, like, I'm looking for footage of this such and such. And sure enough, I have it, and then it adds to whatever they're writing about and whatever they're trying to show. So this is one of the fun things about what I do, is either that or talking to somebody who actually was in the film. But this is giving me that life. I feel like I've kind of met Carol Lane in a way through all this and watching this video and stuff.
Yeah. No, it's been a real fun collaboration to kind of sometimes come back to you and be like, I found this.
Nice.
I had this in the description. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Melissa, and thanks everybody out there. And if you like what you saw, go to avgeeks.com. You can donate on Patreon. But otherwise, everybody have a good, safe, fun weekend. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.